You're watching WSTV Digital Media.
I'm going to call to order the special meeting of the Finance Committee. This is our first of 4 meetings that we're going to be spending on the budget. Thank everybody for being here. We've got a very full crowd today. I'm going to try to finish at 5:30 since we do have 3 more meetings, and I will try to end the formal part of it so that if any folks have any questions or comments they want to give to the staff for additional work, everybody can have a chance to do that as well. Okay. I want to also welcome Ms. Burke back. We're glad to have you back here. You're here for the heavy lifting, trying to get the budget through. So with that, we will start, and I'll turn it over to our budget director. Tony?
Good evening. Good evening. Mayor Pro Tem Burke, Chairman Clark, and members of the council. First, I want to introduce Jesse Ide. He's the chair of our Citizens Budget Advisory Council. He is going to give an update on the report that the committee conducted this year. And with him are some other members, Ms. Hazetta Schuler and Nathan. He's going to make me force to remember his last name. Nathan Bourne. So at this time, Mr. Jesse Ide.
Ms. Ide, if you officially give your name and address for the record.
Yes, my name is Jesse Ide, IDE, and I live at 125 Miller's Crossing Court, Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Thank you for being here, and also thank all the committee members stand up. We'll at least get your picture on TV. Thank y'all for being here as well.
We got cameras.
You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. For the 2017 for the 2018 budgetary year, the city manager proposed that the Citizens Budget Advisory Council, CBAC, should review potential opportunities for citizen engagement in the budget process. With the help of the City of Winston's Budget and Evaluation Office, we had several workshops and presentations from guest speakers around the idea of getting the citizens more engaged with the budgetary process. From all those meetings and workshops, we have come up with a list of 10 recommendations that we feel would help get the citizens more involved in the budgetary process. I will go through those now. Recommendation 1, the Budget and Evaluation Office should engage more with the City of Winston-Salem's Marketing and Communications Department on developing marketing communication strategies related to the budget process. One of the most impressive presentations we had was from the city's marketing and communications department. It's a really good group of folks, and they had a lot of great ideas for penetrating the citizens to get them more involved. Recommendation 2, the marketing and communications department introduced the use of beacon technology that emits a Bluetooth signal to mobile devices in proximity to them and gives a push notification with a distinct message. CBAC recommends that beacons be used to inform citizens about the budget public hearings, budget workshops, and community meetings on the proposed budget. Item 3, budget staff should create a program called Coffee with Council, which will allow for residents to engage with council members about the proposed budget. Meetings would be held at police substations, libraries, or recreational facilities in each council member's ward, just as a way to get some more face-to-face time with folks to get them more involved. Item 4, the Budget and Evaluation Office created an interactive budget balancing game called Budgetopoly. CBAC had a great time playing the game during a committee meeting and recommends that budget staff conduct educational and outreach opportunities in community settings, utilizing the Budgetopoly game as an interactive and fun tool to educate citizens on city's budget process and the difficult tasks the city council faces in making the budget decisions. Staff should tap into existing groups to conduct these workshops. Item 5, consider the viability of creating a digital version of Budgetopoly budget balancing game for the city's website. Item 6, consider the viability of creating a digital tax receipt calculator so that people can see a breakdown of how their tax dollars are spent by category. The digital tax receipt software is powered by Balancing Act and can be purchased through a company called Engaged Public, which specializes in engagement-driven strategies. We had an opportunity to demo the receipt calculator from Charlotte, and we found it very impressive and very insightful into where exactly your tax dollars are going. Item 7, develop interactive budget questions surveys on social media. For example, residents could engage with the city on Twitter or other social media sites by picking their top priority for capital projects and using a hashtag such as hashtag 2019 budget priorities. This is another way to keep them engaged. Item 8, the city should host a physical and or virtual proof of performance bond project tour of the 2014 completed bond projects so that citizens can see how their tax dollars were spent in the last bond. The physical tour would be similar to the Parade of Homes event, and the virtual tour can show before and after photos of their projects and how their tax dollars were used. Item 9, in all marketing materials, the city should highlight the operating costs related to the bond projects. Oftentimes, citizens are unaware of the operating costs and impact associated with approving bond projects. As the city educates citizens on the 2018 proposed bond projects, there should be equal education about the operating expenses associated with each project. And lastly, item 10, by the next bond referendum after the 2018 bonds, the mayor and city council should consider restructuring the duties of CBAC members to be a more active community role, with representatives assigned from each ward. CBAC members would receive training about the city's budget process and upcoming bond projects, then take a leadership role in engaging citizens in their assigned wards on budget bond project awareness. CBAC could also take an active role in leading efforts such as participatory budgeting. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was our findings from the 2018.
Any questions or comments? Ms. Burke?
Your report is very good. And some of the things that you mentioned about going out into the wards, we sort of hit and missed that going to recreation centers before, but I think what you're asking, your committee is asking us to do is very positive. It will make the citizens feel more involved, more part of what's going on.
We agree. Thank you.
Mr. Bessie?
Thank you. Mr. Wright, thank you for the report, and thanks to your colleagues on the committee. I did have a question about recommendation number 2. Beacon technology emits a Bluetooth signal to mobile devices in proximity to them with a push notification. What kind of message would be going out? What form?
Right, so it's a little disc that the city could put in key locations, and if citizens are nearby with push notifications enabled, the beacon would basically send a little notification for things to get at the top of your screen that would highlight, for instance, you are walking past the Benton Convention Center, bond project money would go to renovate this center, or future plans like that. So as folks are walking around town, they would receive notifications highlighting this specific area could be impacted by a budgetary decision.
So you'd have to enable the receipt of this kind of message?
I believe if you just have Bluetooth enabled.
If you have Bluetooth
If you have Bluetooth enabled, they did a rollout at the fairgrounds last year and found mixed results because not everybody keeps Bluetooth enabled. But if you have it turned on and notifications enabled, this will pass a quick little message, no cost or anything like that, to the citizens going by, highlighting a specific item for them.
Thank you. Yeah, whenever we're talking about technology like that, it's like to make sure it's as unobtrusive as possible. And, if it's the kind of notice that you only get if you have chosen to enable that, receiving that kind of notice, that's fine. Yeah. Thank you.
Correct.
Mr. McIntosh.
Yeah, it's an opt-in technology. There's a lot of things in the recommendations that I really like. I mean, getting citizen engagement is really difficult for all of us as we roll things out. Running into people all the time who say, "Oh, I had no idea that was going on."
Right.
A lot of these things I think make very good sense to get this out in front of people and invite them to participate in the project, because that's what we really want. It makes for a better city. So I champion a lot of these.
Great.
Just echo the thanks to the committee members, and more specifically, all the recommendations are great. But one thing we've talked about in the past is a conversation around participatory budgeting in the past. And it is something that I think that City of Winston-Salem should take a hard look at what that looks like for us. Communities that have engaged participatory budget have seen increase of interest in individuals engaging with the budget and what that looks like. And I know Greensboro, Charlotte, and other communities such as that have that in place, and I think it's something that we really should take a hard look at in the future.
We did look at participatory budgeting in particular as well, and the group is very fond of it. Although we will relate that it's in the cities that have instituted it, it's a big strain on the city's budget and evaluation offices to do all the research and due diligence that goes into participatory budgeting. To that end, though, that's why item 10 also highlights that you could rely on a group like CBAC to help out in those efforts if it were a strain on city resources.
I was going to say, I've always believed in citizens' participation, stay at the grassroots. And I want to say to Ms. Tony and your committee that I've said to the city manager even this morning, we need to stop same old, and bring something new and different. It's just so delightful, and I thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Larson.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of, having waded through the budget, and we're going to bore down into it in a little short bit, but there's really two parts of this. One is the bond projects, and I think your idea of an open house tour is particularly applicable as we look forward to the bonds voting coming up. The other part is the question of how your tax dollars are actually being spent, the property taxes that we pay, other tax dollars. And I like the idea of being able to provide that in a more transparent way, because I think a lot of people don't have any idea as to how the money's actually being broken out and spent. So, I mean, I think there's really two issues going on here, and as we look at the bonds, I think we have a good, successful completion record, something we can be very proud of. I think the actual budget process itself and the expenditures that are in this thing are a little more murky to the public as a whole, and anything we can do to elucidate that would be great. Thank you. Thank you for your help.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
I would say my 2 cents, I really like the idea of on Channel 13 showing that type of information, pictures or whatever, before and after. You'd have to continuously update it. I know my Meadowlark or Jameson Park's finished with Meadowlark widening. It hasn't started, so you'd have to update it, but it is something that people pass through that channel very often. Be a very good way to do it. So we commend this to our city manager and staff. Take a good look at all these things. Mr. Ides, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And let me say, I did have one person sign up for public comment. We will have public comments before we adjourn as well. Get everybody in. Gary?
Before Ms. Tony begins going over the budget, I wanted just a couple general comments to Chairman Clark, Mayor Pro Tem Burke, Mayor Joines, and the rest of the members of the City Council. You know, the budget is often, I look at the budget and it's kind of like a three-legged stool. There are 3 legs on that stool. One is citizen services. One leg is employee compensation. And we don't make any products, so 60% of our budget is tied to personnel expenses. And that third leg is taxes and fees. And you know, when you try to balance a budget, just like if you have a three-legged stool, you want to make sure if you're adding, you add equally, or you shave equally, because otherwise that stool's not balanced. And this year, the budget office has done an incredible job. I want to thank Ms. Tony, her staff, and Mr. Rao, as well as our departments, but particularly the budget office. They've done a remarkable job coming up with a balanced budget that does all those things, that keeps our fees low, no increase in taxes, maintains our city services, and realizes that we need to provide a fair compensation rate to our employees. So it's a real amazing effort that they did. So I just want to thank them for their efforts.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Garrity. Ms. Tony, it's all yours.
Okay. Okay, before you is the proposed budget for fiscal year beginning July 1st of 2018 through June 30th of 2019. The full budget with all funds is $530 million. $363 million is for operations, $42 million is for debt service, $125 million is budgeted for capital. When we look at the full budget, the $530 million, and plot it out amongst our strategic focus areas, the big piece of the pie is healthy environment. Under that is mainly water and sewer, solid waste, sanitation, those departments. Second is our service excellence area. That's the general government departments, financial management, interdepartmental type of services, IS, PFM. And then our third largest is safe and secure community. It's 3 departments in that strategic focus area: police, fire, and emergency management. When we look at the revenue sources for all funds, our major revenues, because it includes utilities, is charges for services. That's the biggest piece of the pie on this chart, followed by our property taxes at 25%. The property tax base growth, you've seen this chart. This is the growth over the last several fiscal years. Our current potential growth is at 0.7%. That is a little slow for our growth. We've talked to the tax office. Forsyth County is also experiencing the slow growth trend. Some reasonings they've offered is this is coming off of a revaluation year, and so we're seeing a slow impact from that, as well as companies have the ability to apply for exemptions, and so some of the historic tax credits and Brownsfield exemptions have an impact on our tax base growth, and so we hoping that in future fiscal years we'll see better growth in our base. Looking at just our overall highlights of our budget, even with the slow tax base growth, we were able to balance the budget with no tax increase. So our property tax rate will remain at 59.74 cents per $100 of assessed value. We've added the full implementation of the market study. So the second half of the workforce will have the market study implemented beginning April of 2019. We've added another round of the 2% supplemental pay for police and certified fire. That will start January 1st of 2019. We increased the minimum wage from $11.25 an hour to $12.50 an hour. That will also begin April 2019. We received a grant from the North Carolina Department of Transportation. This is for Business 40 mitigation grant to assist during the transition of the closure of Business 40 in the fall. It's $7.2 million. It'll assist with marketing, the call centers, additional bus service for 8 routes, enhanced bus service for park and ride locations, and a guaranteed home ride home program. We're also further automating our rear-to-side loader trucks. This is in the refuse collections division, which continues the transition from a 3-person crew using the rear loader to a 1-person crew using side loaders. The approximate savings is $210,000 a year, and that's just salaries. We're also proposing to eliminate the commercial dumpster service that is projected to end December 31st of this year. That's supposed to be 2018. We budgeted for half of year, so the savings would be $300,000 for salaries for half a year. Full year, of course, would be approximately $600,000 in savings.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask a quick question? This $7.2 million we're getting from DOT, is that paid out over the course of the project, or how's that money received, and is it annual? I don't think it's annual. So, how is that being distributed, and then when it goes away, what happens?
Well, it really is during the closure of Business 40.
So 2 years.
During that time frame of the closure, the
Okay.
money should come in to offset those costs.
And it will come as a one-time grant then?
Yes,
Is that
one-time
At
grant.
the front end of the project this year, we'll see it this fiscal year?
Yes, but Tony Q, it'll be
That's
on a reimbursable basis.
Okay.
As expenditures occur.
Thank you for that
Ms. Burks,
clarification.
you had a comment?
And we did get a letter from one of the employees concerning if they were going to get that increase, and I did ask the city manager to address this.
And we'll hear.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem asked me, she got a letter from an employee about the $12.50 per hour and the potential to go into $15 an hour by 2021. We'll go over that a little bit later, but based on our current incremental approach, when this 4 years ago we were at $9 an hour, it is very doable to get to $15 an hour by 2021.
Okay. Thank you.
Looking just at our general fund pie chart, most of the expenses are personnel, with the second largest in supplies and services. So our total general fund is $205.4 million. On the revenue side for the general fund, it's mainly supported by property taxes. Is our major revenue source, and then of course followed by sales taxes and then charges for services. In the general fund, there are some changes in positions. As I mentioned before, we are automating further our refuse collection with the rear loader to the side loader trucks. That will allow us to eliminate 8 sanitation laborer positions. Those positions would be moved into vacant positions, so there's no layoffs. They would be just transitioned to another department, as well as the commercial dumpster service that is projected to end in December. The 6 equipment operator positions and 1 supervisor position will be eliminated and staff moved to vacant positions. The COPS grant program will just be temporarily defunded this fiscal year, and that's due to high officer vacancies at the police department. Once they have adequate staffing levels, we will then restore the funds in a future fiscal year.
Mr. Chair. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Are there any, are we beyond any requirements under those grants in terms of maintaining positions?
Well, they just weren't able to fill it, so we actually still will have the funds, the revenue from it. We'll just move it to another fiscal year, as far as I understand.
You talking about the cops position?
Or were you talking about the cops?
Yeah, the cops.
Yeah.
They're just saying, so we're not are we beyond, I'm saying, the obligations that we have with that? So
All of the cities across the country, because of the issues on recruitment and retention, have had trouble filling those cops positions. The grant requires those to be last in after you've fully funded all of your positions that you're paying for locally. So the federal government has extended repeatedly those grants, so it's still available to us to get the full strength.
yeah, that's just want to make sure we weren't.
Okay. On the next page, in order to balance the budget, we needed to freeze a certain amount of positions to realize a certain salary savings of approximately $500,000. The list before you are the positions that we are proposing to freeze. There's a CityLink customer team lead trainer, a police record specialist, a sanitation operator, operations supervisor, a senior admin assistant, and that's in refuse, building construction specialist in engineering, and a senior engineering tech, a painter in recreation and parks, and then as other positions become vacant, we need to realize at least another $120,000. And so that is the list. This will have to be ongoing management of vacant positions, and of course, as service level demands arise, we may have to make some changes to the list, but overall, these are the type of positions that will be frozen.
And they're currently vacant.
Yes, they are currently vacant.
Okay.
All right, now our Human Resources Director, Carmen Cruz, will review some of...
Okay. Mr. Bessie had a comment for you.
Yes, actually, I just had a question about the freezing the 2 engineering positions.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we have had some challenge getting projects completed on a timely basis. What impact will freezing those positions have on that?
These particular positions have been vacant for, we looked at the vacancy days. As an impact, Greg can probably talk about the impacts for projects, but go ahead, Greg.
Mr. Attorney,
we don't anticipate that these would cause a problem for us in the near future, Council Member. However, the first bullet is the pertinent comment. If we do find that we have a problem, then we will look at other positions to freeze in order to thaw these.
okay. Mr. Larson.
I want to ask a little question about the newly vacated positions, and we know that some people are retiring. We also know that there are some people that will probably be retiring very quickly in the next fiscal year. I'm thinking particularly about our Director of Sustainability Programs. Have we identified any future retirements in this list of newly vacated positions?
No, these were not related to upcoming retirements. Obviously, we will realize savings as people leave positions, but this list will be more of a hard freeze where we have identified specific positions that we do not intend to fill. Many of the retirement positions we will fill. I believe the city manager would want some of those filled. So these are ones that have very little impact to direct services and were vacant at the time we came up with the list.
They're currently vacant?
They're currently
All of them are current.
And have been vacant for a while.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't understand that. I thought it might be newly vacant. I mean, as in next year. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Cruz, you're up.
Back in your April meeting, your April 9th meeting, Springstead, our consultant who did our pay plan study, was here to talk to you about their findings. So I'm not going to rehash all that, just recap the highlights of their findings. This was the second year of the pay study that they were doing for us. The first year consisted of labor, trades, and crafts positions and just a few public safety positions. This year, we did the remainder, which was administrative, professional, technical, supervisory, all public safety positions. We re-looked at the ones that they had looked at last year. We just updated the data, and some managerial positions. Overall, it impacted 1,589 employees. So, as you see on the screen, there were two pieces to this: the general pay plan and the public safety pay plan. In the general pay plan, Springstead looked at 122 benchmark positions. They compared the starting salaries to the market and determined that our average our starting salaries were about 6% below the average starting salaries for the market. In addition to that, they determined that we have internal pay inequities. In addition to having market inequities with our external markets, we do have some situations internally that they needed to look at. In addition to that, they looked at 15 sworn police and certified fire positions that were in the survey, and they determined that starting salaries for those averaged 1.66 below the market. That's the wrong one? Hold on. This one, okay. I moved over to, okay. For positions on the general pay plan, Springstead has recommended that we expand the pay plan that they presented to us last year to 30 pay grades to accommodate the positions that they studied. The pay plan, as you probably remember from last year, has a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum for each grade. The lowest pay grade 1, would have a minimum rate of pay of $12.50 an hour. In this structure, Springstead determined that there would be, or there will be, 307 employees, it's about 45% of the folks that were in this group, who are below the market, the minimum. There are 364 that are between the minimum, whose salaries are between the minimum and the maximum, that's about 53%, and 12 who are above the market maximum. They're recommending that, excuse me, that we actually increase they're recommending that we increase the salaries of those employees from the last year's study who are below $12.50 up to $12.50. In addition to that, staff is recommending that we increase the pay of those employees who are below the minimums to the minimums for their pay grades by 2%. And that's a minimum of 2%. So if it takes 5% to get them up to the minimum, that's what we would increase. If it only takes 0.5%, we'd still increase them, a minimum of 2%. And for employees whose pay is between the minimum and the maximum, we're recommending that we give a 2% increase to those employees to address compression. In addition to that, Springstead is still working on recommendations for us that would get us to to $15 an hour by 2021. So we will have a plan for that we will bring back to you, in subsequent years. On the public safety side, Springstead is recommending a pay plan for public safety that has 20 pay grades. That's more than we need for right now, but it gives us some room should we choose to implement other structures to add additional, say, police officer 1, 2, and 3, or whatever we might look at for the future. With this new pay structure, the minimum for police, that would be the minimum for a police officer, would be $41,443, which is 5% above where starting pay for police is now. For firefighter, the minimum would be $39,470, which is 17% above where they are now. In this new pay structure, 33% or 179 sworn police would be below the minimum, would be brought up. 355 would be within the range, minimum and maximum, that's 65%, and 8 would be actually above the maximum. On the fire side, We would have none that were above the maximum, but we would have 157 that were below the minimum, and 211 that are within the range. This chart shows you the current police and fire, public safety, starting pay. It shows you the average, the survey average starting pay and the difference. And this slide really highlights the impact of what you've done for police at the lower levels, particularly over the last few years. If you look at the top of the chart, starting with police officer trainee and going down to police sergeant, go over to the third column of numbers, you'll see that those percentages, the percentage difference between the market starting and our starting current is fairly low. I think that represents changes that you've made, as well as the fact that last year those positions were in the pay plan, in the pay study, and we made adjustments for those positions last year. And then you will see, if you look down at fire, you'll see that the disparity is greater, much greater, and it's representative of the fact that we didn't include fire last year. So. This slide gives you a really good look at what you've done for public safety over the past 3 years and what we're recommending in the upcoming year. So for the upcoming year, as Ms. Tony has said, we're recommending the 2% public safety supplement, which would go into effect in January. In July, prior to that, in July of this year, we would be doing the merit increase, 1 to 3%. Then after that, in January of 19, we would implement the 2% public safety supplement. And then in April of 19, we would implement the pay study recommendations. So it's the same as what we're actually recommending for the general pay plan as well.
Mr. Montgomery?
So the numbers that you presented on the slide before that shows the proposed starting pay is inclusive of the 2% pay adjust, the supplemental pay.
The starting pay is not inclusive of the supplemental pay. This is the starting pay for each of these ranks without any incentives, no education incentives, no military incentives, just base starting pay.
And the reason I ask that question is just the way that you have it timed on how you actually implement the pieces for the increases. So that's subtracting those components and what we'll see. Okay.
Let me follow up on that. Because you don't know when you hire if they're going to have military experience or degree or whatever. But at some point, I think it would be helpful to see what the actual average pay is. And I do know that, I'm just guessing, some of the officers, firemen, whatever, may work overtime, things of that sort. So I think periodically it would be nice to know what the average is for these actual positions.
I can get that.
Because those are probably more the rules than the exception. I expect the incentives probably hit a lot of the class, not all of it, but a lot of it. Okay. Yeah.
One additional comment in reference to it. And so I would ask the question that I've asked this of staff as we've gotten to this point in reference to and to the committee and council as we continue to have conversations moving forward in reference to the public safety supplemental pay. Mr. Garrett, could you explain why we started doing that and the ongoing intention of that supplemental pay?
Thank you, Councilman Montgomery. If you recall, about 4 years ago, this issue came to the forefront of City Council. The issues that the police department brought forward were two things: recruitment and retention. We were significantly behind the market compared to other communities. We had a systemic problem with recruitment as well as with losing officers. Typically, officers that we were losing are the officers between 3 years tenure and, say, 10 years tenure. So they brought those issues forward, concerned about the fact that, and the other issue they brought forward was that our pay plan, and this is probably the most significant thing, our pay plan was not moving officers forward quickly enough. HR did a study, and Mrs. Kruth did a study. We looked at other communities and looked at where an officer would be, was it 5 years in, 10 years in?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Where they would be, how fast they would move forward in their pay plans. Several cities, Greensboro, Charlotte, have built-in steps of upward of 5% in those early years. And so their officers were moving faster and getting paid more after 4 or 5 years. Our officers were concerned they weren't moving as fast because all they got was merit. And that's one of the reasons that made them more interested in other communities. That's why we recommended the 2% supplement, was to, one, catch them up, but also to try to make sure we keep them moving further each year. Y'all have done a great job, and they are, as you can see, at market. My concern is that market keeps moving. Charlotte is talking about, Mr. Rouse, at a 6.5% raise, and is debating doing more. It keeps moving in every community. Every time we add something, somebody else adds something. It's a very difficult market. We've done a great job in the last year and a half on recruitment. The last class had 33. Just ask Mr. Page. We have a class starting Monday. Do we know how many are going to be in it?
I'm waiting to hear from the chief, but it's at least 30.
Right. So, right. But we want to keep that momentum so we can get to full strength, and that's why it's in. But the goal was to get officers to market and to move them along each year. Did I say that right?
You did.
Okay.
And it might have been 35 yesterday, but
Well, go ahead. I was saying my questions in reference to this component was more so in the sense of I supported full council. I think it was unanimous approval by the council when we implemented this adjustment. And my support was that we were so far behind. We needed to do consistent movement forward to make sure that we caught our officers and public safety employees up to market. The question then becomes for us ongoing is what does this mean if we make this a consistent part of the budget, which was not my initial inclination when we did it, was to kickstart us, to move us as quickly as we could, to move our public safety employees at, and in some cases above what the market was. And if we commit as a council that we're going to ensure that we do consistent increases for our entire employees as a city, then the question has become, do we maintain this in the long term? May not be something that we debate in this budget cycle, but it's something that we do have to ask ourselves the questions around what does this look like in the future? Because once public safety personnel consistently get this, if I'm one, I'm going to continue to expect to get it over and over again as long as we maintain it. So I think we need to make sure that we set right expectations of our personnel so that if it changes in the future that they don't feel that the rug was pulled from underneath them.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Larson?
Yeah, I would agree that it appears to me that we are getting awfully close to market rate right now. And the reason we were doing these add-ons in January, whatever, was to get competitive and get us up to market rate. Now I think we have to ask ourselves, what is the problem we're trying to address? And is it retention of younger, is it recruiting, is it a retention of younger recruits? And I defer to our police chief to help us understand whether simply throwing 2% every January is in fact long-term what we need to be doing equally across the board. It might be the problem resides in retention, and we should focus on our younger recruits and maybe some of our lower ranks and give them a little more emphasis than maybe some of our upper ranks. But I think that's a question really for the police to help us advise on. I'm just not sure that just saying, well, 2% across the board at this point is going to eventually address all of the issues that we're really looking to address.
Okay.
And lastly, I just wanted to show you the implementation cost. The general fund cost of implementing this, including benefits, is $1.76 million if we implement it in April as we're recommending. For all funds, it's 1.2.
And those numbers are in the budget.
Yes.
Okay.
you guys.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Burke.
When employees talking about salaries, do you have where they come in and could have conversation with you about if they're dissatisfied with the salaries?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a record of it? That what I need to do, I just need to sit down. Since I've been home, and I am home, I've gotten calls from different folks, and I got to get more up on it myself. So I would prefer to meet with you, and then I'd be able to better answer their questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. McIntosh.
And we had the number for the number of employees who are below the 1250 that will come up. I think it was 307. That represents about 12% of our workforce. And I thought I'd seen it someplace, but do you know what the number is that are below $15 an hour?
I do not have that number with me. It should be on
I
that.
thought it was on that slideshow too, but I
That's
didn't
fine.
find it.
Number of employees that are below $15 an hour is 448.
And that's including the 307.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, and this last slide really supports our feedback and the efforts of citizen engagement in the budget process. We have a flyer with budget highlights that will go out to recreation centers. We have some out here today to educate people about the budget, as well as the budget documents are in all recreation centers and the public libraries within the city limits. We are also going to mail out postcards to community groups and neighborhood associations to inform them about how to weigh in to the budget process. And we are also going to look at some of the recommendations of CBAC and see how we can incorporate that this current year and definitely make it a part of what we do in future fiscal years. Ms. Haysetta Schuler at Winston-Salem State, she's an employee at Winston-Salem State, has already set up a meeting, and it was a good meeting about how to engage some of the students at Winston-Salem State in the process as well. And so in the fall, we hope to start engaging some accounting and finance students in the process as well. Our public hearing is on Thursday, June the 7th, and that is at 4:00 p.m. in the City Council chambers.
So that's a week from today.
That's a week from today.
Okay.
And this is a list of all of our upcoming workshop dates and times and locations.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Montgomery.
I'll just add, every year I do a budget-specific town hall meeting that's held, and mine is held on Thursday, June 7th. For the record, I had my schedule in January, so we're at 6 o'clock on June the 7th.
You can make both.
We'll televise.
That's why we're having the other one at 4, to make
Yeah.
sure we can make it here.
It'll be tight. I'll do that.
Yeah, but I was just saying that just for public who may want to come to that and speak at the event as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next, we do have one person signed up for a public comment. Have that person come up, and then I was going to go around the table and just, I've got a list of questions to give the staff. And by the way, we did get the first printout that came with our packet of kind of questions we asked, and they just keep adding to this as we come up with questions. So, is Mr. Summers here? Come on up, sir. You come to the microphone. If you'll please give your name and address to the record, and you have 3 minutes to comment.
Thank you. I'm Philip Summers of 2422 Peachtree Street in Walltown. Thank you for the chance to participate in the budgeting process. It's good to see Councilmember Burke and Clark. I didn't have a chance to give you all a copy of this proposal when I was at City Council on Monday. I don't know if it'd be okay to give you a copy of it now.
Just hand it to the staff there. They'll get it to you.
It's proposing a fare free route. So it's at its heart, it's about expanding public transit service and affording people access to public transit. I think the Northeast Ward, the East Ward, in the North Ward stand to benefit the most because Route 87 runs up Patterson all the way up to the Walmart there in the north. The proposal highlights some important health assets along that corridor. And, you know, I had a chance to ride 87 the other day. It's the most popular bus we have in our whole route. It does over 200,000 rides a year. I'm proposing that we link it with 107 that runs by the hospital. I really did come today just by way of question. I'd like to know if, in my proposal, if the figures look reasonable as far as what the compensation for fares, or I should say reimbursement, that the fare box is gleaning from those two routes. And then also what the actual cost for adding a second bus to 107 would be. So currently 87 is the only bus that has frequency every 30 minutes because there's a bus that starts on each end and goes the other way. And I think there's just a lot of latent demand in transit, and you see that in that route. You have a lot of numbers because you have a lot of frequency. So the proposal is essentially saying when you add a second bus to 107 that runs to the hospital and to the mall, I think you would see increased ridership. So really it's a request to say, how can we bless the transit rider who, if you have a chance to ride transit, you'll notice that they're working service jobs. I mean, we're talking today a lot about raising the minimum wage of city employees, and that's important. So to me, the reason I faithfully come and talk about transit is it could be a way to really like put money in the pockets of the riders and help with their standard of living. So I think if you made it fare free, the people who are, you know, the 200,000 people who are already riding that route every day, that'd be like a $2 raise to them right then. So I see it as a health piece. I see it as an economic development piece. But I really just wanted to ask those questions in particular about, like, does the proposal even look reasonable? How could we work towards getting something like this in the budget? Because I think you'll see a great return on your investment. I try to highlight that in the proposal. You'll get a lot of rides, and a lot of people who are transit dependent, who are the poorest of the poor, would be benefited.
Thank you, sir. We do have the chairman of the Public Works Committee here, and there is also the Transit Authority does have a commissioner or committee, whatever they may be, and we'll be sure they get a copy. What are they?
It's an authority.
It's an authority, excuse me. The Transit Authority will be sure they get a copy. Mr. Montgomery.
Yep, I was just saying to Councilman Burke and Clark that he mentioned in the comments that it was specific in reference to in advance of the close of Business 40, if that part of the recommendations, and I guess you won't be able to see that in what he was looking at.
Okay. Thanks, sir. Okay. I'm just going to go around the table. Mr. Bessie, I'll start with you if you got any questions, concerns, and obviously we're meeting again next Tuesday, the 5th. So,
thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got my questions in during the briefing.
Okay.
I will just pass on because it was noteworthy. I was at an event today and had a city employee who is actually retiring this year, come up to me unsolicited and say that it's not impacting her so much because she is, essentially on the way out later this calendar year. But she had noticed a significantly improved morale level in her department generally with the pay increases that the employees felt respected and more optimistic about their work. And I think when we get that reaction, we're getting more productivity out of our employees as well, so that the citizens see the benefit of services. I think the plans to move forward with those scheduled and scale increases that will produce a return in service quality.
thanks, sir. Mr. Larson, do you have any additional issues or questions?
Yeah, I will go ahead and raise the elephant in the room, and that deals with the outside agencies and our inability to enhance those funds, particularly dealing with the occupancy tax. And I noticed that $50,000 of the occupancy tax is being reallocated to, I guess, the general grants fund. And I'm trying to understand when outside agencies, we're getting increasing numbers of requests that we don't seem to use the one fund source that we have additional money coming into, not the general fund, but the occupancy tax, that fund is being siphoned off a little bit. And I'm sure there's explanations for this, and maybe can handle it offline, but I would like to look at that. My numbers don't quite work based on what I'm reading in this report. It appears that we have reductions in attachment B of around $36,000, and it looks like we have reductions on the next page of about.
What page are you on there?
I'm on X, Roman numeral 16 and 17.
Roman numeral 15 and 16.
Yeah, this is basically the list of agencies, and I just want to check the number. It's not much numbers. It's not many dollars. The problem is that there's so little money is being spent in support of our arts agencies and stuff that I really would like us to be very judicious about how we look at these figures and where this money is coming from, because we have not been able to enhance our arts and enterprises, our arts and innovation, maybe appropriately, and I would like to spend some time looking at that. The other thing that I've noticed in here is the lack of support for Bowman Gray, and that particular facility, which is the second oldest facility, second only to City Hall, is sort of in a purgatory right now, and as a result of that, I fear that we're beginning to see some maintenance and deterioration issues there, and I appreciate the work the city has taken on in the last several months to do some upgrades, but I don't see in this budget, I see a reduction of support for that, and I need to kind of understand that aspect a little bit better. Facilities, particularly, we know there's major water issues, dealing with restrooms and flushing of commodes and stuff that's going on there, and I don't know whether that's in utilities budget or where that is buried in here, or whether there's facilities money somewhere else other than what I see under Bowman Gray. But right now what I see is less money going there, and I think we're going to have to look at that seriously as a deferred maintenance issue. Those are the two issues that
Thank you very much. Very good. Mr. Taylor, anything?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any questions at this time. I just want to state that I believe this is a good budget. I just want to thank the manager and staff for putting it all together. I certainly support the pay increases, starting from increasing the minimums over to the increases to police and fire. I think it makes great sense. Just if I can pivot for 1 second, I just want to thank Mr. Summers for coming out and speaking to us. I think his proposal makes sense. Mr. Summers does live in the Southeast Ward, and he is aware of the Transit Authority. I think he has applied for the Transit Authority. I just want to publicly state my support for your candidacy for the Transit Authority, and all those who think likewise. This ultimately improves the quality of life for the citizens of this community, and so I'm certainly in support at this time. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, you got anything?
I echo what Councilmember Taylor is. It's a good budget, a tight budget. There's not much room to flexibility in there, but I think it's important that we did that this year, given the, I'd say, anemic property tax base growth and the fact that we are going to have, I think, a bond issue we're going to take to the voters in November, so I think it's good that we're doing that. I would just ask, I haven't got into it as well, as the transit center, I'm getting some concerns about the level of maintenance there in that facility. It might need a little freshening up from here and there, so maybe we can take a look at that when we get into the transportation section.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McIntyre?
Yeah, I want to commend staff for threading a very small needle this year. I mean, this is always a difficult process, but I think this year especially. I look forward to a rise in revenue. I hope we don't get to the spot where we've been in the past, where we forego maintenance issues and vehicle upkeep and then have to pay for that with higher prices down the road. Just a couple of quick things. I've got a bunch of tabs here, and I've talked to staff a little bit, and I'll have more conversations. But under mail and printing services, we're up 10.
Give us the page.
I'm sorry, this is page 4.
Page 4.
Mail and printing services, we spend $738,000 a year. I mean, I'm a big proponent of digital. Is there anything we do in that category to sort of attack that? That's up 10%. Seems like that's an area that we should kind of be going after to eliminate a lot of that. On the next page, 5, less interdepartmental charges, a 450% increase. I don't know what that number is. Again, I can take that information offline, but 450% increase seems like a huge jump. We went from 474 to 2.6.
That's page 5.
And there's a negative number in front of it, so I'm having trouble sort of reading what that figure means.
That's probably funny money, something to do with one of the grants, but we'll get to the information.
Yeah, okay. That's why we need these questions. Staff will get on it for us.
And then the last one I haven't already bugged about is on page 174, principal retirement. It's up percentage change 24.5, and it seems like a pretty steady rate of growth there from starting in 16, fiscal 16-17 at 15 million, dropped to 14 million, and now we're up to 18 million. I'd just kind of like to know what constitutes that number and whether that's a trend we need to be concerned about.
Page 174.
And I can take that offline.
Well, all these, I'm expecting to come back in the packet, because everyone raises good questions, we all want the answers. Okay. Ms. Burke, you got anything else you want to add?
Yes, I want to say too, I have asked the city manager about the question about mail. Why are we using the time for them to drop these packages off that most of the time it's not that much in them? So I've asked Michael to go through mine because I don't quite understand why we're still spending money for that and it needs to be reviewed. Did it go to deaf ears, Mr. City Manager?
No, ma'am. We're looking at all those things. It may be, I know we polled the council, we'll look again, it may be time to completely eliminate the home delivery with so few things, but we'll look at that. We'll also come back with a report on what this actually, I imagine a lot of it probably has to do with our contract for copying services, but I'll find out.
And also, thank you for that. I've asked a lot of my questions and concerns before this meeting with the city manager, but I want you to know that since with technology, we don't need to be using all this paper, and the sheets of paper are too big. And also, you young ones, you know. And also, what I want you to know, we get a lot of literature. Are the people really reading those books? Everything. But may I have an opportunity to say to the honorable mayor and distinguished council people and the city manager how much I appreciate your thoughtfulness. And to the citizens in this community, thank you for the appreciation that you have for me. You know when you're thought of when you're away. So I appreciate all the kind concerns and two simple words that mean so much. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Montgomery, do you have any additional?
Just a reiteration of what's already stated in terms of one, thank you. Thank yous to the city staff for the work that you've all done to bring this budget forward. And most of my questions have been responded to and asked in as we move to this place. Just a couple of things. As a council member representing the area where Bowman Gray Stadium is, I want to assure folks that the staff and myself and others are very, very hard working. That physical stadium, Councilmember Taylor has a parking lot.
One or two, but
that there's much work that's underway in reference to that. And so there's tremendous work that's happened to try to figure out how we continue to work in that area, the same way that others make sure that places like Old Salem and those things receive support and funding. As the council members there, we want to make sure that we attend to those specific areas in our area as well. So thank you.
Thank you. I've just got a few. There was no NBA game on the other night, so
it's one tonight.
Got more than a few. Got one tonight though. First off, in the capital budget, there's a large item. I think it's $30 million for advanced metering in those are your water meters. I would like to see the economic analysis on that. I'm assuming we're going to read them electronically, whatever. I would just like to see what the return is there. And number two, on page 80, I'll bring this up every year. We count our crime differently than everyone else. If you rob the bank and run a red light, get in the way, that's 2 crimes, and we put down 2. Other cities put down 1. And if you turn to page 80, our crime rate's 50% higher than Greensboro or High Points. Now, there is an asterisk that explains that this is an apples and oranges chart, but if we can't have apples to apples, I'd rather not have a chart. Now, in 2021, everyone's going to have apples on that page, but until then, it is just very inaccurate. I see the paper back there. I won't even report that we have 62 per 1,000 and Greensboro's got 41 when they're totally different numbers. Anyway. Next one on page 113. Try to do these quickly. Our refuge costs are considerably higher. And this ties to a question related to that. We are increasing our side loaders, so we're saving some money there. My question there, have we optimized our refuge pickup? And are there other optimizations there? And I do know we will always have some rear loaders because there are some folks we pick up in the back of the house and other type things. But either that or that is an apples and oranges comparison because Greensboro's half our cost, and I can't believe they do anything considerably different. But that's that question. Page 119 on water treatment. I have no idea what I had here. water,
You can brag about it.
wastewater. I'm gonna brag, we're a lot lower.
Number.
We should
Yeah.
tweet it.
Good.
Maybe I was thinking of Greensboro. Total, their water treatment cost per gallon is considerably below ours, and we have brand-new water treatment. Not brand-new, but the Thomas plant's been rebuilt, and we spent a fair amount of money at some of the others, so just a few comments there. In general comment on utilities, Ms. Saunders, I'll throw this one at you again. We tend to carry high cash balances and high loan balances in the utilities department, and I just want to be sure we're optimizing those, because to the extent that we have cash and loans, we're certainly borrowing our own money, but I also recognize the fact that you need cash balances. So just want to be sure we're optimized there. Just a few numbers there. On page 123, this is the Stormwater Management Fund. When I look at page 122 on fund balance appropriation, we're not appropriating any fund balance for the coming year budget, yet the projected fund balance drops $7 million. I'm just trying to reconcile 0 with a -7. If you look on the chart, from estimated to projected, we go from 19.8 to 12.6, but the last line item on the page 122 is the fund balance appropriation is 0. So, and the resources and the expenditures match. So just some comments there would be nice. The I-40 funding, and I'm going to kick this one back over to Mr. Bessie. I do think it's important, and this is beyond the budget, that we take a look at what we're doing there. My first thought is, and I can only speak to my ward, but I'm expecting a lot of folks not to take 40, but to take Country Club, Robin Hood, Renolda, whatever. I think we need to be out there, particularly the first couple of weeks, to be sure that the lights are optimized. And I'll just take 5 points as an example, because I think that hits 3 different wards there. You may need the light being on longer from Country Club to First Street versus Miller or something, whatever it may be. Or Stratford Road too. So I think it's more than just bus routes. I think you're going to have a lot of congestion getting off at Peters Creek. People can go to Peters Creek and get off. Be sure those lights are optimized, because people are going to come off Peters Creek, turn or get off at the exit, go up the ramp, take a left on Peters Creek, go around to 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 4th Street, whatever. So I do think we need to be sure we're observing that and have optimized the lights. Just some examples. And there's others. You're going to get MLK's going to pick up traffic. 52's going to pick up traffic, whatever. My last pet, I can't leave without my pet peeve on bus service on page 136. 2012 was the highest ridership, was I'm rounding at 3.5 million. We're projecting only 2.5 this year. That's a 30% decrease in ridership over that period. I am aware that we have some, I think we call them circular routes. I might call them direct routes. And so you may have some person riding one route where in the old days they rode 2, downtown and back out, whatever. I would like to see ridership by route, and if you could just asterisk the ones that are is circular the right term? Is that the term we're using? Or cross-link or whatever? Circulators. Because I think it's only fair that you maybe multiply that number by 2, since maybe those people are eliminating a route. But that just concerned me, and I think part of that drop is the economy picks up, more people maybe can afford to not to ride the bus or whatever it may be, but just would like some information there. Last comment, 2020 is the next reevaluation, I believe, so that means 2019, next year is when they're going to be looking at property values and things like that, and in 2020 we'll get new numbers. Is that right? Or something like that. So we're still probably 2 budgets away from dealing with that, but just get that.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
To that end, I would ask the staff to revive our resolution that we passed on last year in reference to the reevaluation, because the city attorney can correct. The response from the county was specific that our request came in after it should have been considered in reference to when they started the reevaluation process.
Good point.
So that we would make that request on the front end, so that they can consider that moving forward as they bring that forward.
Good point. Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Chairman, when you were correcting, not correcting, but just pointing out the not inconsistencies with the cost of crimes per thousand.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Made me think there was, and Wesley, it wasn't your headline there, but the it said the city's paying $5 million in this budget for incentives. It's projects that we've done over the years, and it's simply returning a portion of the taxes that those companies are paying to us. We aren't, I want the public to know, we aren't taking money from this budget and putting into incentives. We're using the money from the companies themselves.
Might be good to get what the actual taxes they paid were.
Yeah.
That would be helpful.
Good point.
And some of those were done last year, some of them were done 4 or 5 years ago.
Yes, exactly.
Good point.
Thank you.
Ms. Burke?
If I need to say that at this time, I noticed that we have done so much to improve this city of Winston-Salem since I first got on this board. One of my relatives came up. She said, Winston is a beautiful place. She's out of Charlotte, but Winston is a beautiful place. And people are coming here, and I've said to the mayor more than one time, you need to toot your horn a little bit louder.
Again, I want to thank everybody for coming, and I will echo the comments made. I think the staff worked very hard on this. It truly is a three-legged stool, and if you add money here, you got to do something to the other legs to keep them all level, because we don't want a stool that's out of balance. So thanks, staff, for all being here. We will meet again next Tuesday at 4:30. We are adjourned.